What do you really know when you throw out all the words and all the concepts and all the beliefs and all the assumptions? We're in a bookshop full of words and concepts and beliefs, so if we throw them all out, imagine we just throw all the books out the window. Not to devalue any of them. Throw my book out there as well. It's just that when we're relying on words and concepts, we overlook our own knowing in not knowing. So not knowing in our thinking, but a totally different kind of knowing. A knowing that comes in that space of not knowing in thinking. A knowing that in fact has always been there, since you were a baby, even before. A knowing that every child knows, maybe not consciously, maybe not in words. But as we grow up, we become very serious adults. We take ourselves very seriously. The roles that we think we're playing become very serious roles. The characters that we play, that as children we could so easily change characters, now have become stagnant and fixed, and they start to feel like a prison. And of course then we long to be free. How can I be free of all these prison-like fixed beliefs that I seem to live with? And we have that sense of what is beyond that prison. If we didn't have that sense, we wouldn't even know that the way we're living is a prison. So we already have that sense. That's what brings us to a meeting like this or a bookshop like this. Because we already have that sense, that knowing. And we're looking to have it confirmed. We're looking to find it in a nice spiritual book or in a meeting like this, so that we can then say, ah yes, finally I've had it confirmed, reflected. Because actually we spend our lives walking around with this question, who am I? What the hell is going on here in this strange life? We come into this life and we're taught by our parents, by our families, our teachers, society in general, how we're supposed to be, the kind of person that we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to want, what we're supposed to need, what we're supposed to achieve, how we should be, how we should feel, how we should think, what's right, what's wrong, what's moral, good, bad, all of that. What it means to be a good person or a bad person. And we take it on innocently because we don't know who we are. We're like a blank screen, a blank canvas. You know. We come into this life like innocence, open, like a sponge, and we just soak it all up. And we start to think, well, this is how we're supposed to be. And as we take it on more and more, our lived experience starts to feel very kind of stiff and contracted, and we're now limited to this way of being in this stiff little box here. And we have this distant memory of what was there once before, that sense of freedom and openness. I still know it, but how can I live it? How can I bring that into the forefront rather than this distant memory. And it gets more and more painful to live like this, trying to reach back for this freedom. And more the thinking tries to help by providing nice spiritual concepts or spiritual practices. And maybe there are temporary experiences that you might have where you do have a sense of that openness again. But at some point, it all closes in again. This is often what I hear from people, the sense of openness, and and I've lost it again, and I've come back to the prison of daily life, of thinking that I'm limited again. How can I permanently be that, live as that? And in my experience, in my own life, but also in working with people for the last 10 or however many years it is, there's no hope. And it sounds terrible to really acknowledge that. There is no hope of finding what you're looking for. Because you're looking in the wrong way, in the wrong place. You're using your thinking, which is the only tool that you've been taught to use. Either thinking or feeling, but either way, thinking, the feeling is interpreted by thinking anyway, so it ends up being the same thing. You're trying too hard. You're trying to get it. You're trying to become it. But in fact, you are already that. You never left it. You haven't moved an inch. You've only been pretending all this time. So the whole spiritual path actually is hopeless. That's why I say it's a great disappointment to really, really acknowledge the hopelessness of the whole spiritual path. And you can only really acknowledge that when you're exhausted. You know, when you've tried everything. Maybe not every single thing, but you've tried enough. And for different people, that point of exhaustion comes at different times. So how it is for me or for someone else doesn't mean that it has to be like that for you. Because each one is unique in their level of how much you can take. And what I mean by that point of exhaustion is that whether it's a spiritual practice, whether it's going to teachers or reading books or watching YouTube or whatever, each time you try something or practice something or pour your effort and energy into something, you pour hope into it. And hope is very smelly. Sounds good, oh yes, hope, we should love hope. Yeah. But what is hope? Hope imagines a much better future and denies the present experience. That's why it's smelly. That's why I hate hope, actually. So, hoping for something better one day, but right now it's really shit. Actually, this experience, exactly as it is, whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, whether it's easy or not, whether it fits into your spiritual ideas or not, is all that there is. And in this moment, right now, there is no hope for it to get any better. Because any hope starts to be a dream. You start to have to imagine, and then you're going off again into that other kind of one day kind of world. And while you're hoping and waiting and dreaming, it's painful because you might have temporary experiences where Go like, oh yes, I've got what I've hoped for. Oh no, I've lost it again. And the highs and the lows go on. And those highs and lows are very exciting. That's why we love the spiritual path. We get very addicted to getting it and then losing it, getting it and losing it. But at some point you get exhausted with that. At some point you just have had enough. I know in my experience it came to a point where I'd really just had enough of getting it and losing it. It was just too painful. I wanted what was real. I didn't want any temporary experience anymore. I wanted to know once and for all, what is real, what is true, what is freedom, what is real, what is behind all these words and temporary experiences. Someone just tell me the truth. Because, you know, growing up in this crazy world, nobody knows. Everyone's pretending and lying to each other, trying to get by. Everyone's trying to survive. It's not their fault. But nobody's saying how it really is. It takes a lot of courage to actually stop and say, well, actually, this is it. Just this sensation, this sound, just sitting here right now together. This is it. There's nothing better. The minute you start hoping for something more, the whole cycle begins again. Now, of course, you can't stop your thinking from doing that. And that turns into another whole practice if you get into that, where you try to control your thinking. I'm not suggesting you try to stop thinking. I'm suggesting that you look at the nature of reality right now. No matter what your thinking says about the future or the past, it's irrelevant, really, because this is it anyway. There's no escape from the present experience. You may have noticed this. Wherever you go, it's here. And when I'm talking about the present experience, I'm talking about the present experience that includes every aspect of what is happening. Whether it's thinking, that's the present experience. Whether it's sitting and hoping for a better present experience, that is the present experience. It doesn't have to be in any particular way. So I'm not recommending any practice or any way of living. I'm just suggesting that you look at the nature of the way it is. I'm describing the way it actually is, rather than suggesting that you need to make any change. I'm saying, hey, look, have you noticed that it's hopeless? You can't get it one day. It's here already. Have you noticed that? But actually, you're on the spiritual path. When you're trying to get it, all you're doing is you become like a junkie. You know, you're just on drugs, basically, getting high every time you get it and then lose it. Every time you have a moment of insight, and then it passes, and then you're on the path again, thinking, well, I couldn't possibly get it. They've got it. I haven't got it. I need to keep trying, working hard to get it. And it's endless. But what I'm saying can be very, as I can't remember his name, the guy who introduced me, said that it can be very provocative. Yeah. This is a very strong message. It's so strong that it can ruin your life if you really acknowledge it. If you really see the truth of it. When I say ruin your life, I mean as you think you know it. It can really bring what you've been longing for. But what you've been longing for doesn't necessarily fit into your ideas. Depends how much you want it. See? There's this book, right, which I wrote a while ago, and it, Die to Love, actually, it is really all about death. And that sounds very depressing. But it is about dying to what you think. It doesn't mean that you need to stop thinking, but seeing that the thinking doesn't mean anything. Dying to what you think is, then you realize actually that you are the love that you've been searching for. But it's not the love that fits into a concept or an idea or an assumption or a belief. It's not a particular experience of love. It's not a nice loving feeling. It's the real thing. Not a temporary thing. It's the love that doesn't come and go. But in order to know that, you have to lose all your concepts about it. And fear can come up. How will I live like that without believing my concepts? How will I survive? How will I function? It can be uncomfortable. That's why I said it depends how much you want it. For me, it was a matter of life or death. This is about life or death.